She was 7 months pregnant when her husband handed her divorce papers at a five-star restaurant on their wedding anniversary. He told her she was not CEO material. He told her she did not understand power. He told her that his mistress, his VP of marketing with a Wharton MBA, was a better fit for his world. He offered her $2,000 a month and a used Audi, and he slid a pen across the table like he was closing a business deal. She signed without a word. She walked out. And on the sidewalk, 7 months pregnant and completely alone, she made one phone call. "Daddy," she said, "it is done. Cut the lines." What her husband did not know, what he never bothered to find out in 5 years of marriage, was that the quiet woman who darned his socks and clipped coupons and drove a Honda Civic was the sole heir to a $90 billion banking empire. The woman he called Plain had been secretly funding his entire company for 3 years through a shell corporation. Every loan, every credit line, every lucky break he bragged about at dinner parties. It was all her money, every single dollar. And the prenup he was so proud of, the one his lawyers wrote to protect his little millions, it said separate assets. What is mine is mine. What is yours is yours. He thought he was protecting himself. He had no idea he just handed her the weapon that would destroy him. Within 48 hours, he lost his company. He lost his mistress. He lost his home. He lost every cent to his name. And the woman he threw away stood at a podium at the United Nations while he watched from a television in a strip mall repair shop, wearing a name tag and fixing strangers' laptops for tips. This is not just a story about karma. This is not just a story about revenge. This is a story about what happens when you throw away a diamond because you are too busy chasing glitter. Lesson and value. Here's the truth this story will teach you. The people who love you quietly are almost always the ones holding everything together. They do not brag about it. They do not ask for credit. They just show up every single day and keep the roof from caving in. The moment you stop seeing them, the moment you mistake their silence for weakness, is the moment you start losing everything that matters. This story is about recognizing value before it is gone. It is about understanding that real power is not a title or a corner office or a Forbes cover. Real power is the ability to walk away from someone who does not deserve you and build something better with the pieces they tried to break. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you were not enough, this story is for you. And if you know someone who needs to hear it today, share it with them. Sometimes the right story at the right moment can change the way someone sees themselves. If this story hit you somewhere deep, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell me, was Lydia too harsh, or did Grant get exactly what he deserved? I read the first 500 comments personally, and trust me, this one always starts a real conversation. If you felt something during this story, smash that like button. It takes 1 second, and it helps more people find stories like this one. Share it with a friend, a sister, a mother, anyone who has ever been told they were not enough by someone who did not deserve them. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because next week I have got a story that is even crazier. A cheating husband, a secret pregnancy, and a winning lottery ticket that changes everything. You do not want to miss it. Thank you for staying until the end. I do not take that for granted. Your time matters, and I am grateful you spent it here. On the day of their 5th wedding anniversary, Grant Mercer looked his pregnant wife in the eye and handed her divorce papers with a smirk. He claimed she was not CEO material. He saw her Target maternity dress and her coupon clipping as signs of failure. He was completely blind to the reality that the woman sitting across from him 7 months pregnant with his child, was the secret sole heir to the Sinclair banking dynasty. Grant thought he was trading up, but the moment he signed those papers, he did more than end a marriage. He declared war on the only financial lifeline he had ever known. And the woman he just discarded was about to teach him what real power looked like. Here is something worth remembering before we begin. The people who love you quietly are usually the ones holding up the roof. The moment you stop noticing them is the moment everything starts to collapse. Grant Mercer was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The waiter at Le Bernardin poured the vintage Pinot Noir with practiced, silent grace. It was a 2015 Domaine de la Romanée Conti, a bottle that cost more than Lydia's first car. Grant Mercer did not even glance at the label. He was too busy checking the reflection of his Rolex Daytona in the butter knife. "Happy anniversary, Grant," Lydia said softly from across the white linen tablecloth. She was wearing a navy blue dress she had bought off the clearance rack at Target 3 years ago. It stretched modestly over her 7-month belly. The dress was clean, simple, and entirely unremarkable. Just like Lydia. Or at least that is what Grant told himself every time he looked at her these days. He looked up and flashed that charming, practiced smile. The same smile that had graced the cover of Forbes 30 Under 30 last year. The same smile he used on investors, on reporters, on women who were not his wife. "Happy anniversary, Lyd," he said. He did not reach for her hand. He did not ask how she was feeling. He did not glance at her belly, where his daughter was growing. Instead, he reached into his suit jacket, a bespoke Tom Ford that fit him like armor, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the crisp white tablecloth, right between the candle and the untouched bread basket. Lydia looked at the envelope. Then she looked up at his eyes. Her expression did not change. There was no gasp, no tears welling up. Just a stillness that Grant mistook for confusion, for stupidity, for the dull blankness of a woman who could not keep up with his world. "I got you something too," she whispered, reaching for her purse. "Wait." Grant held up his hand, his voice dropping an octave. He put on his serious CEO face, the one he practiced in the mirror before board meetings. "Open mine first. It is important." Lydia hesitated. Her hand hovered over her battered leather tote bag. Slowly, she picked up the envelope. She slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the document. The bold letters at the top seemed to scream in the quiet restaurant. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." She read the words twice. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly. The baby kicked, as if she already knew something was wrong. "I know this is hard," Grant started. His rehearsed speech flowed instantly, smooth as the expensive wine. "But look at us, Lydia. We are in different worlds now. When we met, I was coding in a garage, eating ramen noodles. Now Mercer Technologies is about to go public. I have galas to attend, investors in Silicon Valley, partners in Tokyo, and you." He paused, waving his hand vaguely in her direction. "You like your book clubs and your gardening. And honestly, you are showing up to investor dinners in maternity wear from Target." He took a long sip of the $3,000 wine and gained confidence with each swallow. "Sierra, my VP of marketing, she gets it. She understands the pressure of my world. She speaks the language. Honestly, Lydia, I am doing this for you. You are drowning in my world. I want to set you free." Lydia read the first page of the document without expression. She did not scream. She did not throw the wine in his face. She simply asked a question in a voice so calm it should have terrified him. "Did you tell her about the baby, Grant? Does Sierra know she is getting a man who leaves his pregnant wife at a restaurant on their anniversary?" Grant stiffened in his chair. The The charm flickered for just a moment before he recovered. Sierra and I are together. I am not going to lie to you anymore. The baby will be fine. Kids are resilient. And frankly, Lydia, I need a partner who can walk into a room and command respect, not someone who clips coupons and darns socks. The irony was so thick it could have choked her. Lydia looked down at her hands. Simple hands. No flashy manicure, no gaudy rings. But those hands had signed checks worth millions to keep his startup alive during the lean years. Checks routed through shell companies, so his fragile ego would never bruise. Those hands had built his empire while he was too blind to notice. The prenup? Lydia said quietly. Grant scoffed and waved his hand dismissively. Do not worry about that. I am being generous. I will let you keep the house in New Jersey and the Audi. I will give you a monthly stipend of $2,000 for 2 years. But the company and the intellectual property, that is mine. You signed the prenuptial agreement 5 years ago, Lydia. What is mine, and what is yours? Well, he leaned back in his chair with a cruel smile. You did not have anything then, and you do not have anything now. He slid a Mont Blanc pen across the table like he was closing a business deal. Sign it, Lydia. Do not make a scene. Let us handle this like adults. Lydia picked up the pen. She looked at him one last time, searching for a trace of the man she had fallen in love with. The humble dreamer in the garage who just wanted to change the world with his code. He was gone, replaced by this hollow suit who thought he was a king because he had a few million in venture capital funding. Okay, she whispered. She flipped to the back page and signed her name with a steady hand. Lydia Mercer. Grant let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He snatched the papers back and checked the signature like a banker verifying a deposit. Thank you. You are doing the right thing. Lydia stood up. She was careful with her balance, one hand on the table, the other on her belly. She did not touch her food. She did not touch her wine. She had not been able to drink it anyway. 7 months pregnant. But Grant had ordered it for himself. He always did. I was going to give you my gift, she said. Her voice was stripped of emotion, flat as still water. Oh yeah? What was it? Grant asked. He was already texting Sierra under the table. His thumbs moved fast across the screen. She is signing now. Went smooth. Champagne tonight? I was going to tell you that my father's coming to town to meet you, Lydia said. Arthur wanted to discuss the Series B funding personally. He was going to write you a check. Grant laughed, a harsh barking sound that made the couple at the next table flinch. Your dad? The retired mechanic from Ohio? Lydia, I am looking for $50 million, not an oil change. Give him my best, though. Tell him I said hi. Lydia smiled. But it was not the warm, gentle smile Grant was used to seeing. This smile was cold, controlled, terrifying. It was a smile Grant had never seen on her face before. And if he had been paying attention, if he had been looking at her instead of his phone, it would have stopped him cold. Goodbye, Grant, she said. She turned and walked out of the restaurant. Her heels clicked steadily on the marble floor. She did not hurry. She did not stumble. She moved with the quiet dignity of a woman who had just made a decision that would reshape both of their lives forever. As she stepped onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk, the noise of taxis and pedestrians swallowing her whole, she pulled her phone from her purse and dialed a number she had not called in 5 years. Daddy? She said into the phone. Her voice cracked for the first time all evening. It is done. You can cut the lines. On the other end of the line, Arthur Sinclair, a man whose name made Wall Street bankers sweat, whose handshake was worth more than most countries' budgets, set down his glass of bourbon and said 2 words. About time. The packing took less than 2 hours. Grant stayed at the Four Seasons that night, naturally, with Sierra. So Lydia had the house to herself. It was a sprawling modern mansion in Alpine, New Jersey, cold and gray and filled with furniture that a designer had picked out because Grant wanted the house to look like a magazine spread. Everything was sharp angles and polished concrete. It never felt like a home. It felt like living inside a showroom where someone had forgotten to include any warmth. Lydia did not take the jewelry Grant had bought her. Those were guilt gifts, a diamond bracelet for the birthday he missed, earrings for the anniversary he forgot, a necklace for the time she found Sierra's lipstick on his collar, and he told her she was imagining things. She did not take the designer maternity clothes he had forced her to wear to charity galas. Dresses that cost $4,000 apiece and made her feel like a mannequin. She packed her old jeans, her worn-out college hoodies, the locket her mother had given her before she passed away, a stack of dog-eared paperback novels, and most importantly, a small fireproof safe from the back of her closet. But before she went to the closet, she stopped at the room at the end of the hallway. The room she had been working on in secret for the past 3 months, the nursery. She had painted the walls herself, a soft butter yellow that reminded her of sunshine. She had assembled the crib alone on a Saturday afternoon because Grant was at a conference in Austin. Or at least, that is what he told her. She had hung a mobile of tiny silver stars above the crib and arranged a row of stuffed animals on the shelf. On the wall, she had hand-painted a small wooden sign in white letters, Baby Mercer. Lydia stood in the doorway and pressed both hands against her belly. The baby kicked again, hard this time, as if she was saying, "I am still here, Mama." The tears came then, not for Grant, not for the marriage, but for the family her daughter would never have, for the nursery that would never hear laughter, for the father who had walked away from his own child without a second thought, because his pregnant wife did not fit his brand. She cried for exactly 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face, turned off the nursery light, and closed the door. Her phone buzzed. It was Maggie. Margaret O'Brien. Maggie, to everyone who knew her, was Lydia's best friend since their freshman year at Columbia University. Maggie was a trauma nurse in the emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital. She had seen things that would break most people. She was loud, funny, fiercely protective, and she had hated Grant Mercer with a burning passion since the day she met him. "Please tell me you finally kicked him out," Maggie said the moment Lydia answered. "He kicked me out," Lydia said. Her voice was flat but steady. "On our anniversary, at Les Bernardins." "Les Bernardins?" Maggie's voice went up 3 octaves. "He could not even ruin your life at an Applebee's? That pretentious. Okay, I am coming over with ice cream and trash bags. We are packing your stuff and his ego into separate containers." "Maggie, I am fine, girl." Maggie's voice dropped into her serious nurse tone, the one she used when patients tried to leave the hospital against medical advice. "You are 7 months pregnant, sitting alone in a house that looks like a West Elm catalog threw up, and your husband just left you for a woman named Sierra. You are not fine, and I'm bringing the chunky peanut butter kind. Do not argue with me." Despite everything, Lydia almost smiled. Maggie could find something ridiculous in the apocalypse. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Grant. "I will send the movers for the furniture next week. Be out by noon tomorrow. Sierra wants to measure for drapes." "P.S. Tell your dad the mechanic I said. Thanks for the memories." Lydia stared at the text for a long time. Something shifted behind her eyes. It was subtle, like watching the tide go out before a tsunami. The softness drained away. The patience evaporated. What was left was something Grant had never seen because he had never bothered to look. She walked to the closet and opened the fireproof safe. Inside was not cash or diamonds. It was a stack of documents, birth certificates, trust fund deeds, a passport bearing a name she had not lost in 6 years, Lydia Sinclair. Because here's the truth that Grant Mercer never knew. The truth that would have changed everything if he had been smart enough or humble enough or decent enough to see it. Lydia Sinclair was the only daughter of Arthur Sinclair. And in the world of high finance, the Sinclair name was not just old money. It was the foundation that old money was built on. Names like Zuckerberg or Musk or Bezos were new money. Flashy, loud, the Sinclairs were the bedrock beneath all of it. They owned the banks that loaned money to the billionaires. They owned shipping lines that moved goods across every ocean. They held real estate empires in London, Dubai, and Manhattan. They controlled vast reserves of gold bullion in vaults beneath the streets of Zurich. The Sinclair family fortune was not measured in millions. It was not measured in billions. It was measured in the kind of numbers that made governments nervous. And Lydia was the sole heir to all of it. When she met Grant 6 years ago, she was trying to escape. The Sinclair name was a gilded cage. Every man she dated wanted her checkbook. Every friend she made wanted her connections. She could not walk into a room without people calculating her net worth, so she left. She changed her name to Lydia Smith. She moved into a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. She got a job at a used bookstore. She wore jeans and sneakers and ate dollar pizza. And she fell in love with a broke computer programmer named Grant Mercer, who was building a startup in his garage and could barely afford ramen. He was passionate, he was hungry, he had a dream. And when he looked at her, he saw Lydia. Not Lydia Sinclair, not the heiress, just Lydia. The girl who laughed at his terrible jokes and brought him coffee at midnight when he was debugging code. She thought she had found real love, the kind that had nothing to do with money. She was wrong. 3 years into the marriage, Grant's company was failing. He could not make payroll. No bank in New York would lend to him. His code was good, but his business sense was terrible, and he was hemorrhaging cash. He was 2 weeks away from bankruptcy. Lydia picked up the phone and called her father's private asset manager. Buy his debt, she said. Route it through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Call it Apex Ventures. Make sure he never knows it came from me. For 3 years, Apex Ventures was the invisible hand that fed Mercer Technologies. Every bridge loan that kept the lights on. Every emergency credit line that covered payroll. Every lucky break that Grant bragged about at dinner parties, claiming he was a genius who always found a way. It was all Lydia. Every single dollar. And the prenuptial agreement that Grant was so proud of, the one his lawyers had drafted to make sure that if his company took off, this nobody girl from Ohio could not take half his fortune. It said, in clear black and white legal language, that whatever is acquired by a party remains the sole property of that party. Neither spouse has any claim to the familial, wealth, or inheritance of the other. Grant thought he was protecting his millions. He had no idea that the woman across the table from him was worth more than his entire industry. He had just signed a document that legally locked himself out of her billions, and locked her out of nothing because she had never claimed a single cent of his company was hers. The prenup was not his shield, it was her sword, and he had handed it to her with a smirk. Lydia closed the safe. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Charles Harrington III answered on the first ring. "Miss Sinclair," he said. His voice was like aged bourbon and old leather. "We have been expecting your call." "Activate the clean slate protocol," Lydia said. "Full execution, Mercer Technologies. Every loan, every credit line, every contract that runs through any Sinclair subsidiary." I want it all on my desk by morning. Timeline for execution, Ms. Sinclair? Not yet, Lydia said. She looked out the window at the cold, gray mansion that had been her prison for 5 years. I will tell you when. I want him to feel safe first. I want him to think he has already won. That is when we pull the floor out. Understood. And Ms. Sinclair? Harrington paused. Welcome back. She hung up. Outside, a black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows was waiting at the curb. A man in a dark suit stepped out and opened the back door. Good evening, Miss Sinclair, the driver said, bowing his head slightly. Your father is waiting at the airstrip. The jet is fueled. Thank you, James, Lydia said, sliding carefully into the leather interior, one hand on her belly. She looked back at the house one last time. The house where she had tried to build a normal life. The house where she had been told she was not enough. The house where she had assembled a crib alone and painted stars on a nursery ceiling while her husband was in bed with another woman. The Hamptons estate, she said quietly. And James? Call Harrington back. Tell him one more thing. Yes, ma'am? Tell him I am going to need a very large closet. I have a gala to attend. The car pulled away from the curb. The mansion grew smaller in the rear-view mirror until it disappeared completely. The plain housewife was gone. The Empress had returned. The Sinclair estate in the Hamptons was everything the Alpine mansion was not. Where Grant's house was cold glass and concrete designed to impress strangers, the Sinclair estate was warm stone and old wood designed to shelter family. It sat on 40 acres of rolling green lawns that ended at a private beach. The main house had 14 bedrooms, a library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, and a kitchen where Arthur Sinclair himself still made scrambled eggs every Sunday morning. Lydia arrived after midnight. Arthur was waiting on the front porch in a flannel shirt and work boots, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He looked like what he told people he was, a retired mechanic from Ohio. The flannel was soft from years of washing. The boots were scuffed from weekends spent under the hoods of vintage Ferraris in his workshop. But the watch on his wrist cost more than most people's houses, and the phone in his pocket had the personal numbers of 3 sitting presidents. He opened the car door himself and helped his daughter out. He looked at her belly. He looked at her face. He saw the tear tracks she had tried to hide. Come inside, baby girl, Arthur said. His voice was deep and gravelly and endlessly gentle. I made soup. They sat in the kitchen. Lydia ate chicken soup while Arthur listened to everything. He did not interrupt. He did not pace. He did not pound the table or swear revenge. He simply listened, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a cold, controlled fury that was far more frightening than any outburst would have been. When Lydia finished, Arthur set down his mug. I could end him tonight, he said. One phone call. 30 minutes. He would not have a company by sunrise. I know, Lydia said. But not yet, Daddy. Why not? Because I want him to walk into that gala next week and see me. I want him to understand exactly what he threw away, and then I want him to watch it all disappear, piece by piece, slowly enough to feel every single thing he loses. Arthur studied his daughter's face. He saw something there he had not seen in 6 years, the Sinclair steel. He nodded once. Your mother would be proud of you. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away. Now go to bed, Arthur said. You are growing my granddaughter, and she needs rest. We will plan the war in the morning. For the first time in months, Lydia slept through the night. She was safe. She was home. Her father's army of lawyers was already sharpening their blades. Grant was at the Four Seasons drinking champagne with Sierra, celebrating his freedom, completely unaware that the woman he had just thrown away controlled the oxygen supply to his entire company. Lydia slept peacefully in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by old books and family photographs. She believed the worst was over. She was wrong. 3 days later, Lydia was in the Hamptons Estate Library, reviewing documents with Harrington's legal team when her vision blurred. A sharp pain, unlike anything she had ever felt, ripped through her abdomen. She gasped and grabbed the edge of the mahogany desk. "Ms. Sinclair?" Harrington looked up from his papers. "Something is wrong," Lydia whispered. She looked down. Blood. Bright red blood soaking through her dress and pooling on the leather chair. The next 90 minutes were a blur. James drove 110 miles per hour to Southampton Hospital. Arthur sat in the back seat holding Lydia's hand while she screamed. The medical team was waiting at the emergency entrance because Arthur Sinclair had called the hospital director personally and told him to have every specialist in the building ready, or he would buy the hospital and fire everyone in it. The diagnosis came from Dr. Ruth Campbell, a no-nonsense obstetrician with 30 years of experience and gray hair pulled into a severe bun. "Placental abruption," Dr. Campbell said, her voice calm but serious. "The placenta has partially separated from the uterine wall. It was triggered by extreme stress. Lydia, your blood pressure is dangerously high. If we cannot stabilize you in the next 24 hours, we may need to deliver at 30 weeks. Your baby would likely survive, but there would be significant risks." Lydia lay in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and IV drips, listening to the steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat on the fetal monitor. That sound was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Each small, rapid thump was her daughter saying, "I am still here. I am fighting. Fight with me." Maggie arrived 4 hours later, still in her scrubs from a 12-hour shift at Mount Sinai. She had driven 90 miles without stopping. "I broke about 14 traffic laws getting here," Maggie announced, dropping her bag in the corner and pulling up a chair next to Lydia's bed. "So, if I get arrested, you are posting bail. Also, your dad's security team tried to pat me down at the gate. I told them I am an ER nurse and I know 7 ways to make a man cry. They let me through." Despite the pain and the terror and the tubes in her arms, Lydia managed a weak laugh. "Thank you for coming. Where else would I be?" Maggie squeezed her hand. "Now tell me what the doctors said and do not leave anything out. I will translate the medical jargon into regular people language." Then Lydia's phone lit up on the nightstand. Arthur picked it up. His face went gray. He turned the screen toward Lydia. It was a news alert from the Wall Street Tribune. The headline read, "Grant Mercer tells press my wife left me. She is unstable. I fear for my unborn child's safety. I am filing for emergency custody." The room went silent except for the beeping of the heart monitor. "He is using the baby," Lydia whispered. Her blood pressure numbers, on the monitor, began to climb. "He is using our baby as a weapon." Within hours, the story was everywhere. Grant, coached by Sierra, had gone on a full media blitz. He had reframed the entire narrative. He was the worried father, the devoted husband who came home to an empty house. His pregnant wife had disappeared in the middle of the night, fled to an unknown location, refused to communicate. Sierra fed additional details to gossip blogs and entertainment news sites. Sources close to Grant Mercer say his wife has a history of erratic behavior. There are concerns she may be suffering from a prenatal psychological condition. Close friends worry about the safety of the unborn child. Strangers on the internet were now debating whether Lydia Mercer was mentally fit to be a mother. Comment sections filled with opinions from people who had never met her, never spoken to her, never seen the bruise on her heart from 5 years of being told she was not enough, and Lydia could not fight back. She was lying in a hospital bed with an IV in her arm and a blood pressure cuff that beeped every 3 minutes, trying to keep her daughter alive inside her body. "I will end him," Maggie said, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "I am an ER nurse. I know exactly where to apply pressure." "Maggie," Lydia said weakly. "Fine. I will only apply moderate pressure." Arthur stood at the window, staring out at the parking lot. His reflection showed a man whose jaw was clenched so tight, the muscles in his neck looked like bridge cables. "Say the word," Arthur rumbled. "One phone call. I will bury him so deep they will need an archaeological dig to find his career." "Not yet," Lydia said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was iron underneath it. "Let him think he is winning. Let him smile for the cameras. Men who smile at the wrong time do not realize the photographer is still shooting." She closed her eyes. The heart monitor beeped. The baby kicked. "Call Harrington," Lydia said. "Lydia, tell him Grant just gave us everything we need for the counter motion. Get the medical records from Dr. Campbell. Get the timeline of his media statements. And get me a copy of every single interview he has given in the last 48 hours. "What are you going to do with it?" Maggie asked. "I am going to let him build his own coffin," Lydia said. "And when he is done, I am going to hand him the nails." 1 week after Lydia's hospitalization, a temporary custody hearing was scheduled via video conference. Lydia appeared on camera from her hospital bed. Her hair was pulled back. She wore no makeup. The IV line was visible in her arm. She looked exactly like what she was. A woman fighting to keep her baby alive. Grant appeared from his lawyer's office in Manhattan. He wore a $5,000 charcoal suit. His hair was perfectly styled. Sierra sat beside him in the background, wearing a concerned expression that had been practiced in the mirror that morning. They looked like a power couple from a magazine cover. Stable, professional, winning. Grant's lawyer, a fast-talking man named Derek Sloan, who played golf every Thursday with half the judges in Manhattan, presented the case with polished aggression. "Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about the welfare of his unborn child. Mrs. Mercer abandoned the marital home without notice. She has relocated to an undisclosed location and has refused all attempts at communication. Given the circumstances, we are requesting that Mrs. Mercer undergo a full psychiatric evaluation before any custody determination is made. We are also requesting that the court mandate disclosure of her current location for the safety of the child." It was masterful. Every word was designed to paint Lydia as unstable and Grant as the responsible parent. The fact that Lydia was in a hospital fighting a placental abruption caused by the stress of her husband's betrayal was never mentioned. The fact that Grant had not asked about the baby once since the divorce papers were signed was never mentioned. The fact that Sierra had been sleeping with Grant for the better part of a year while Lydia was pregnant was never mentioned. On Lydia's side of the screen, Charles Harrington III sat in a chair next to her bed. He was calm, unhurried. He had a leather briefcase beside him that contained enough financial documents, wire transfers, and communication records to end Grant Mercer's career, reputation, and freedom in about 15 minutes. But Lydia had told him to wait. Harrington presented a minimal defense. He noted that Lydia was under medical care. He requested additional time. He was polite, measured, and deliberately underwhelming. Because Lydia was not trying to win this hearing, she was letting Grant win it. The judge, an older man named Harold Whitfield, who had indeed played golf with Derek Sloan on multiple occasions, ruled predictably. He ordered Lydia to submit to a psychiatric evaluation within 14 days. He did not order Grant to do anything. Grant sat back in his chair and smiled directly at the camera. It was a small smile, satisfied, superior. Lydia saw it. He smiled, she whispered after the video connection ended. He actually smiled. Arthur, who had been sitting silently in the corner of the hospital room throughout the entire hearing, with his arms crossed and his face unreadable, leaned forward. "Let him smile, sweetheart," Arthur said. "A smile at the wrong time is just evidence with teeth." Lydia lay back on her pillow and stared at the ceiling. The baby kicked. The monitors beeped. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the hospital room in shades of orange and gold. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The softness was gone. The patience was gone. What remained was steel wrapped in silk. "Daddy, call the jet. Cancel your trip to Paris. I am handling this myself. The doctor said you need rest." I do not care what the doctor said. He used my baby to call me crazy on national television. He smiled about it. "I am going to that gala next week, and I am going to look him in the eye, and then I am going to take everything he has, slowly, so he feels every single thing he loses." Arthur Sinclair looked at his daughter. He saw her mother in her eyes, the same fire, the same patience, the same terrifying calm before the storm. He nodded. "I will call the pilot." Maggie, who had been sitting in the corner reading a medical journal and pretending not to eavesdrop, looked up. "I am coming too," Maggie said. "Someone needs to make sure you eat something that is not revenge for dinner." Lydia almost smiled. Almost. "Bring the emerald dress," she said. "Which one? The one that makes me look like a pregnant goddess of war." Maggie grinned. Now that is the Lydia I have been waiting to see. Over the next 7 days, the Hamptons estate transformed into a command center. Lydia stabilized. The baby was safe for now, though Dr. Campbell warned that stress remained the primary danger. Lydia ignored the warning. She had a war to plan. She convened the team in her father's study, Harrington and his associates, a forensic accounting firm that specialized in corporate fraud, Arthur's personal intelligence team, former federal agents who now worked in the private sector, and Maggie, who contributed nothing to the legal strategy, but provided continuous emotional support in the form of sarcastic commentary and an endless supply of baked goods from the Hamptons' best bakery. Lydia laid out the plan with the precision of a military general. "Step 1, she said, standing at the head of the long mahogany table in the study. "We do not touch the loans. Not yet. Let Grant think the Apex Ventures situation is just a financial hiccup, a paperwork delay. Let him focus on finding new funding. Step 2. He will go to Ethan Caldwell. Caldwell is the only investor in New York with enough liquid cash and enough appetite for blood to move fast. Caldwell will offer predatory terms. Grant will have no choice but to consider them. Step 3. The Sinclair Foundation Gala at the Metropolitan Museum. I will attend. I will not hide. I will not say a word about the divorce or the custody hearing. I will simply be seen as myself, as Lydia Sinclair. Step 4. After the gala, simultaneous strikes. Call every Apex loan. Cancel the Sinclair Maritime Cloud Server contract. Freeze the shell accounts. File counter motions for full custody with complete financial disclosure. She paused and looked around the table. He wanted a partner who understands power. I am going to give him an education he will never forget. Harrington made a note on his legal pad. And Sierra Walsh? Lydia's expression did not change, but something flickered behind her eyes. I am glad you asked, she said, because Sierra is not just a mistress. She is something much worse, and Grant has no idea. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails, wire transfer records, and encrypted file logs. Our forensic team found this last week, Lydia continued. Sierra Walsh has been copying Mercer Technologies' proprietary AI algorithm and selling it to Caldwell Holdings through an offshore intermediary. She has been doing it for 6 months. Grant's golden girl is not just sleeping with him behind my back. She is stealing his life's work and selling it to his worst enemy. The room went quiet. Does Grant know? Harrington asked. Of course not, Lydia said. He is too busy admiring his own reflection to notice he is being robbed. Do we tell the FBI? Arthur asked. Not yet, Lydia said. We let the gala happen first. We let Grant see who I really am. Then we give him one chance to hear the truth about Sierra from my lips. After that, Harrington sends the evidence to the FBI. Sierra will be arrested within 48 hours. And if Grant does not believe you at the gala? Maggie asked from the corner, where she was eating a croissant. Lydia looked at her friend with a smile that would have made Grant Mercer's blood run cold. He will believe me, she said, because by the time I am done talking, he will not have a single person left in the world to trust. 1 week after the custody hearing, while Lydia was preparing her strategy in the Hamptons, Grant Mercer was living in a bubble of delusion that was about to pop. He walked into the Mercer Technologies headquarters on a Tuesday morning like he owned the building, which technically he believed he did. The divorce was moving smoothly. Lydia had vanished without a fight, just as he predicted. No drama, no screaming lawyers. She had just disappeared. Weak, he thought, as the elevator carried him to the executive floor. She always was weak. He poured himself a coffee in the break room, winked at a new intern, who quickly looked away and strode into the boardroom. Jessica was not there. He meant Sierra. He kept mixing up their names in his head, not that it mattered. Sierra was there, sitting at the head of the conference table in a red power suit, her blonde hair swept back, her expression sharp and focused. The board members were gathered around the table with the nervous energy of people who knew something bad was coming. Today was the day they were supposed to finalize the Series B funding round with Apex Ventures. $50 million. The injection that would take Mercer Tech from a promising startup to a global player. The deal that would put Grant on the cover of Time magazine. Good morning, everyone, Grant boomed, dropping into his chair and propping his feet on the table. Let us get this signed. I have a tea time at noon. Grant, the CFO, a heavy-set man named Howard Davis, looked up from his tablet. His face was the color of old concrete. We have a problem. Grant paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. What problem? Did the servers crash again? It is Apex Ventures, Howard said. His hands were visibly shaking. They pulled out. The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens in the seconds between lightning and thunder. What do you mean they pulled out? Grant laughed nervously. We have a signed term sheet. This was a formality. Howard, this was supposed to be done. They did not just pull out of the Series B, Grant. Howard set the tablet down on the table like it might explode. They called in their loans. Grant's coffee mug stopped midair. Loans? What loans? The bridge financing from 3 years ago, the operating capital from last year, the emergency line of credit from last month. Howard was sweating through his shirt now. Apex Ventures holds 80% of our total debt. The terms stated that the debt was callable at will by the creditor. We all signed it because we were desperate, and they were the only ones willing to lend to us. They cannot call it all at once. Grant said, slamming his fist on the table, hard enough to rattle the water glasses. That is $20 million. We do not have that kind of cash on hand. They gave us a deadline, Sierra interjected. Her voice was sharp, but there was something else underneath it. Something that sounded a lot like calculation. 24 hours, or they file for insolvency and seize everything. The assets, the intellectual property, the code, everything. Get them on the phone, Grant screamed, standing up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. Who is the contact at Apex? Get Smith on the phone. Get anyone on the phone. I tried, Sierra said, looking up from her laptop. The phone number for Apex Ventures is disconnected. All inquiries are being routed through a law firm. Which firm? Howard looked like he was about to be sick. Harrington and Associates. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. Harrington and Associates was not just any law firm. They were the most feared legal operation on Wall Street. They represented heads of state, oil dynasties, the Sinclair family. Why would Harrington be involved with a shell company in the Cayman Islands? Grant muttered, more to himself than anyone. There is more, Sierra said. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to the room. We just lost the Sinclair Maritime Cloud Server contract. Grant spun around. That is our biggest revenue stream. That is 60% of our recurring revenue. The client sent a termination notice this morning, effective immediately. They cited instability in leadership. I am the leadership, Grant roared. I am the most stable CEO in this entire sector. Who authorized this? Sierra turned from the window. Her face was carefully blank. The contract termination came from Sinclair Maritime, the global shipping company. The name hit Grant like a slap. Sinclair? Your dad? The retired mechanic. He remembered Lydia's words at the restaurant. My father, Arthur, wanted to discuss the Series B funding personally. Number. It was impossible. Lydia was Lydia Smith. Her dad fixed cars in Dayton, Ohio. Grant had seen photos. The man in greasy coveralls. The small house with the chain-link fence. It is a coincidence, Grant said, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Lots of people are named Sinclair. That is like saying everyone named Ford is related to Henry Ford. Look, we fixed this. We need a new investor. Fast. Who? Howard asked. His voice was hollow. Apex has already flagged us as high risk. No bank in the city will touch us. The news is already spreading. Grant stared at the conference table. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface. He looked afraid. Ethan Caldwell, Grant said. The room groaned collectively. Ethan Caldwell was everything Grant feared becoming. He was a corporate raider, a vulture who circled failing companies, bought them for pennies, stripped them for parts, and left the carcasses to rot. He had destroyed more startups than the dot-com crash. He was also Grant's sworn enemy from their days at Wharton Business School, where Ethan had beaten Grant for every academic honor and then mocked him about it at every alumni event since. He is the only one with liquid cash who can move fast enough, Grant said, buttoning his jacket and straightening his tie as if armor could be made from silk. I will go to him myself. I will offer equity, a lot of it. We just need to survive the week. Grant, Sierra said, and for a moment, just a moment, something crossed her face that looked almost like guilt. If you go to Caldwell, he will eat you alive. I do not have a choice, Grant snapped. Unless you have $20 million in your Prada handbag, sit down and let me handle this. Sierra's eyes narrowed. The first visible crack in the paradise Grant thought he had built. Grant stormed out of the office and into the elevator. He pulled out his phone and dialed Ethan Caldwell's number. It rang twice. Well, well. Ethan's smooth, mocking voice slid through the speaker like honey laced with poison. Grant Mercer, to what do I owe the pleasure? Finally ready to admit my algorithm is better than yours? I need a meeting, Grant said, trying to sound authoritative. Tonight. Tonight, I am afraid I am busy. Ethan's voice dripped with amusement. There is a private gala at the Metropolitan Museum, the Sinclair Foundation Charity Ball. Very exclusive. Old money, real money, the kind of money that does not need to advertise on Instagram. But I suppose I could get you a guest pass. If you are willing to ask nicely. Grant gritted his teeth. I will be there. Wonderful. Wear a tuxedo. And Grant, Try not to look so bankrupt. It upsets the catering staff. The line went dead. Grant stood on the sidewalk outside his own building, pedestrians flowing around him like water around a stone. He did not know that he was walking into a trap. He did not know that the gala was Lydia's territory. And he certainly did not expect that the woman he had thrown away, like yesterday's newspaper, was about to reappear as the most powerful person in the room. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed into a cathedral of light and power. Crystal chandeliers threw prismatic rainbows across the marble floors. A red carpet, thicker and plusher than the one at the Academy Awards, stretched up the iconic front stairs. Photographers lined both sides, their flashbulbs firing like distant lightning as Manhattan's most powerful people ascended into the glow. Grant stepped out of an Uber Black. He could not secure a limousine on short notice because every luxury car service in the city was already booked by people who actually belonged at this event. He adjusted his tuxedo. It was the same one he had worn to his wedding 5 years ago, though he would never admit that to anyone. The fabric pulled slightly across his shoulders. He had gained weight. Stress eating. Not that he would admit that either. He felt small. Usually Grant Mercer walked into a room and owned it. He had that effect on people. The jaw, the smile, the confidence that bordered on arrogance, but never quite crossed the line in public. But here, surrounded by people whose family fortunes predated the founding of the country, Grant felt exactly like what he was. A kid from the suburbs who had gotten lucky with venture capital and mistaken it for greatness. He scanned the crowd. He saw a United States senator laughing with a Silicon Valley billionaire. He saw an oil baroness from Houston clinking champagne glasses with a European duke. He saw hedge fund managers whose personal fortunes exceeded the GDP of small nations, standing in small circles, speaking in quiet voices about things that moved markets. This was old money, the kind of money that did not yell. It whispered, and when it whispered, empires crumbled. Grant, over here. Ethan Caldwell was leaning against a massive Egyptian statue near the entrance to the Temple of Dendur exhibition hall. He held a glass of amber liquid that probably cost more per ounce than gold. Ethan looked effortless. While Grant was sweating through his rented shirt, Ethan looked like he had been born in a tuxedo, and the tuxedo was grateful for the privilege. "Ethan," Grant said, rushing over with his hand extended. "Thank you for getting me in. We need to talk numbers. I have a proposal." Ethan did not shake his hand. He just smiled, a cruel, knowing curl of the lip. "Relax, Mercer. Drink first. Business later. Besides, you have not seen the main event yet." "I do not care about the event," Grant hissed, leaning in close. "I need $20 million by tomorrow morning. I will give you 15% equity. Clean deal. Fast close." Ethan laughed. It was loud enough that several heads turned in their direction. 15%? Grant, by tomorrow morning, your company will not be worth the paper the stock certificates are printed on. I hear Apex Ventures is foreclosing. Bad news travels fast in this room. You are radioactive, my friend. "Then help me," Grant said. And for the first time, the desperation broke through the polished surface. He sounded exactly like what he was, a drowning man reaching for anything that floated. "I might be persuaded," Ethan said slowly, swirling his drink, "to buy your debt, in exchange for 60% equity, full board control, and your resignation as CEO. 60%? That is robbery. That is mercy," Ethan corrected. "Take it or leave it. But hush now." He nodded toward the grand staircase. "The hosts are arriving." The lights in the great hall dimmed. A hush fell over the hundreds of guests, spreading outward like ripples on still water. A single spotlight hit the top of the grand marble staircase. A voice boomed over the speakers, rich and resonant. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of the Sinclair Group, Mr. Arthur Sinclair, and his daughter, the director of the Sinclair Foundation, Miss Lydia Sinclair. Grant rolled his eyes. Sinclair again. Who cares about some old money family and their charity write-off? Then he looked up, and his voice died in his throat. At the top of the stairs stood an older man, silver-haired, jaw like granite, the kind of face that belonged on currency. He wore a tuxedo that fit like it had been sewn directly onto his body, but Grant did not look at the man. He looked at the woman on his arm. It was Lydia, but it was not his Lydia, not the woman in sensible sweaters and messy buns, not the woman who clipped coupons and drove a used Honda Civic, not the woman he had told was not CEO material 1 week ago at Le Bernardin. This woman was a vision of power made flesh. She wore a gown of shimmering emerald silk that flowed over her pregnant figure like water over marble. Diamonds cascaded from her neck, catching the spotlight and throwing tiny rainbows across the faces of everyone below. Her hair was a wave of gold, styled with effortless elegance. Her posture was straight as a cathedral column. But it was her eyes that stopped the room. They were clear, fierce, unbroken. She did not look down at her feet the way she used to. She looked out at the crowd as if she owned every person in it. And she did. Many of them literally banked with her family. She descended the stairs with one hand resting protectively on her belly. 7 months pregnant and radiating the kind of authority that had nothing to do with titles or corner offices. This was inherited power, the kind that ran in bloodlines and shaped continents, the kind that Grant had told her she did not possess. The crowd parted for her like the sea parting for Moses. Billionaires nodded their heads. Celebrities reached out just to brush her hand. A former Secretary of State stepped aside to let her pass. That is, Grant whispered, his brain short-circuiting. That is Lydia. That is my wife. Ethan leaned in close, his breath warm with expensive scotch. Correction, Grant. That is your ex-wife, and that is Lydia Sinclair, the sole heir to the Sinclair banking fortune. Estimated net worth, depending on which publication you believe, somewhere between $70 and $90 billion. Her father is Arthur Sinclair, the man you called a retired mechanic. Grant's knees nearly buckled. He likes to restore vintage Ferraris, Ethan continued cheerfully. It is a hobby. He spends weekends at his estate in Greece, de Bibium, but during the week he moves nations. You really did not know? Grant watched as Lydia reached the bottom of the stairs. She stopped. She scanned the room, slowly, like a queen surveying her court, and then her eyes locked onto Grant's. For one long, endless second, the rest of the room disappeared. It was just the two of them, separated by 30 feet of marble floor and a chasm of choices that could never be uncrossed. Grant expected her to look away, to be embarrassed maybe, or perhaps sad. The old Lydia would have looked down at her shoes. Instead, she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 5 years hiding her power to protect a man who did not deserve it, and who had finally stopped hiding. Grant pushed through the crowd. He did not think. He could not think. His brain was running calculations at impossible speed, rewriting everything he knew, searching desperately for an angle. She is rich. She is powerful. I can fix this. We are not technically divorced yet. The papers, did the judge finalize them? Maybe there is still time. Maybe I can charm my way back in. I have done it before. I can do it again. He shouldered past a group of Japanese investors, ignored their annoyed looks, and planted himself directly in Lydia's path. Lydia, he called out. His voice cracked on the second syllable. The music seemed to drop. The circle of elites surrounding Lydia fell silent, sensing that something was about to happen. In this world, drama at a public event was better than any investment return. You could not buy entertainment this good. Lydia turned slowly. Up close, she was breathtaking and devastating in equal measure. The sapphire and diamond necklace she wore was probably worth more than the Series B funding Grant had been begging for. "Grant," she said. Her voice was cool, polished, completely stripped of the warmth she used to save exclusively for him. "I did not expect to see you here. This is a charity event. I thought you only attended things that benefited you personally." "Lydia, what is this?" Grant gestured wildly at her dress, at the room, at her father standing 5 feet behind her, with the protective intensity of a man who could buy and sell countries before breakfast. "Why did you not tell me?" "Tell you what?" She raised one perfect eyebrow. "That my family has money? Would it have mattered, Grant? Would you have loved me more?" The question hung in the air like a blade. "We are partners, Lydia." Grant lowered his voice, trying to deploy the famous charm. He reached for her hand. "Secrets destroy marriages. We can talk about this. We can work this out. I was hasty. I was wrong about the divorce. Let me come home. Let us start over." Lydia did not take his hand. She looked at it as if he were offering her something unclean. "Partners?" She stepped closer. Her pregnant belly was between them now, a physical reminder of everything he had thrown away. "You called me unstable on national television. You filed for emergency custody of a baby you have not asked about in 6 weeks. You told a reporter I might have prenatal psychosis. You told the judge I fled the marital home." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but somehow it carried through the silent hall. Every ear was straining to hear. "Does this look like psychosis to you, Grant?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in his professional life, Grant Mercer had no pitch, no angle, no clever words. Just the raw, exposed terror of a man who was watching his last chance slip through his fingers in front of 300 of the most powerful people on earth. A heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder. The grip was iron. Grant flinched and turned. Arthur Sinclair stood behind him. The older man was 6'2" and built like the cars he restored in his spare time. His eyes were cold enough to freeze running water. "I believe the lady has finished speaking with you," Arthur said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder rolling across a valley. "Mr. Sinclair," Grant stammered. "Arthur, there has been a misunderstanding. I have the utmost respect for your daughter. I love her. I always have." "Respect," Arthur repeated. He said the word like he was tasting something rotten. "I read the divorce papers, son. I saw the stipend you offered her. $2,000 a month. My daughter spends more than that on flowers for her charity galas. You offered to let her keep the Audi. I bought her a fleet of cars for her 16th birthday. I did not know," Grant pleaded. "She told me you were a mechanic." "I am," Arthur said, and a dangerous light flickered in his eyes. "I fix things that are broken, and I scrap things that are beyond repair. Right now, Grant, you are looking a lot like scrap metal to me." Grant pulled free of the grip and straightened his jacket, trying to recover some dignity in front of the watching crowd. "This is personal," he said, putting on his business voice. "But business is business, Mr. Sinclair. Apex Ventures is holding my company's debt. If you call it in, you destroy a promising technology company. You destroy value, jobs, innovation. That is bad business, and you know it." Lydia laughed. It was genuine, amused, musical, and it cut Grant deeper than any insult ever could. "Oh, Grant." She shook her head slowly. "You still do not get it, do you?" She took a step toward him. The crowd pressed closer, drawn to the spectacle like moths to a flame. Apex Ventures was not an investment fund, she said. It was a piggy bank. My piggy bank. I authorized every loan, every bridge, financing, every emergency credit line. When no bank in this city would touch your spaghetti code because your burn rate was out of control and your financials were a disaster, I called my father and told him to fund you. When you could not make payroll and you were about to lose your entire engineering team, I wrote the check. I routed it through a shell company so you would never know it was me, so your pride would stay intact, so you could keep telling yourself and everyone else that you were self-made. She paused, letting the words land. You were never self-made, Grant. You were kept. By me. The silence in the great hall was absolute. 300 people held their breath. Grant's face went through a series of colors. Red, white, then a gray that matched the granite pillars around them. You cannot do this, he whispered. Lydia tilted her head. The prenup you wrote, the one that says separate assets. It works both ways, darling. My billions are mine. Your debt is all yours. Every penny. She leaned closer, her lips near his ear, her voice so quiet that only he could hear the next words. And he would remember them for the rest of his life. And there is one more thing you should know. Sierra Walsh has been stealing your proprietary AI algorithm and selling it to Ethan Caldwell for the last 6 months. Your mistress is not just sleeping with you behind my back. She is robbing you blind and selling your life's work to your worst enemy. I have every email, every wire transfer, every encrypted file. Harrington is sending the evidence to the FBI tonight. She pulled back. Grant's face was the color of old paper. Your lover betrayed you, Lydia said, loud enough for the room to hear. Your wife financed you, and you chose wrong. Happy anniversary, Grant. She turned to her father with a grace that made the movement look choreographed. Come on, Daddy. The governor is waiting for us. Arthur Sinclair gave Grant one last look. It was not anger. It was not even contempt. It was pity. The kind of pity you feel for something that used to work, but is now beyond fixing. Then they walked away, and the crowd closed behind them like water filling the space where a stone had sunk. Grant stood alone in the center of the hall. The photographers, realizing they had just witnessed something extraordinary, turned their cameras on him. Flashbulbs erupted in his face like tiny explosions. He looked across the room for an ally, any ally. He saw Ethan Caldwell leaning against a pillar, raising his glass in a mocking toast. Ethan mouthed 2 words, 60%, but even that lifeline was gone now, and they both knew it. Grant realized, with the slow, sick clarity of a man watching his own car crash in slow motion, that 60% was a fantasy. He was not going to get a deal. He was not going to save the company. He was going to lose everything. And the woman who could have saved him, the woman who had saved him for years without him ever knowing, was walking away from him for the last time. And she was doing it in emerald silk, with diamonds in her hair and their daughter in her belly, looking more powerful than he had ever been or ever would be. The fall of Grant Mercer did not happen with a whimper. It happened with the deafening roar of a landslide. The morning after the gala, while Grant lay unconscious in his hotel room, still wearing last night's tuxedo, stinking of scotch and shame, Lydia's operation executed with military precision. At 6 a.m, the Mercer Technologies Board of Directors held an emergency meeting by conference call. They voted unanimously to remove Grant Mercer as CEO, citing gross negligence and failure of fiduciary duty. The vote took 11 minutes. At 7:30, Apex Ventures formally called in all outstanding loans, $20 million, due immediately. The demand letter was signed by Charles Harrington III and delivered by courier to every board member, every investor, and every banking partner that Mercer Tech had ever worked with. At 8:15, Grant woke up. showered, put on his favorite charcoal suit, the one from his Fortune magazine cover, tied his tie in a perfect Windsor knot. He needed to look invincible. He drove to the office, telling himself that everything was going to be fine. He was Grant Mercer. He had talked his way out of worse situations. This was a negotiation tactic. That was all. When the car pulled up to the glass and steel tower that housed Mercer Technologies, Grant noticed something strange. The lobby, which was usually a hive of activity at 8:30 in the morning, was completely still. No engineers rushing to stand-up meetings, no interns juggling coffee trays, just silence and fluorescent light. Grant walked to the security turnstiles and tapped his access card against the reader. A harsh red light flashed. Access denied. He tapped it again. Same result. Must be a glitch, Grant muttered. Miller, he called to the security guard, a man Grant had walked past every day for 3 years without ever learning his first name. Buzz me in. I have a board meeting. Miller did not move. He stood behind the security console, with his arms crossed and his face unreadable. I cannot do that, Mr. Mercer. Before Grant could respond, a voice echoed from the direction of the elevators. You were the CEO, the voice said. Grant spun around. Standing in the lobby was a man in a blue windbreaker with the letters U.S. Marshal printed across the back in large yellow text. Beside him stood 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a severe black suit holding a stack of files. Grant Mercer? The marshal asked, stepping forward. Yes, but what is going on? This building is now a seized asset under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bankruptcy Court. We are executing a foreclosure order on behalf of the primary creditor. Apex Ventures, you need to leave the premises. The woman in the black suit stepped forward with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. She opened a file. Mr. Mercer, you signed a waiver of the standard 30-day grace period in the Series A bridge loan agreement 3 years ago. Clause 14, Section B. In the event of a material breach of trust or leadership instability, the creditor reserves the right to immediate asset forfeiture. Material breach of trust? Grant sputtered. I have not breached anything. The board voted at 6 this morning. They removed you unanimously. Your access has been revoked. You're trespassing, Mr. Mercer. You need to leave immediately. Grant looked up at the mezzanine level. A small crowd of employees had gathered, looking down at the scene. He expected outrage. He expected loyalty. He expected someone to run down and defend him. Instead, he saw relief. He saw whispered conversations. He saw a developer he had screamed at last week for a minor code error taking a photograph with his phone. They were not mourning their fallen leader. They were watching the show. Grant stumbled out of the building and onto the sidewalk. He needed Sierra. She was the fixer. She would know what to do. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. The number you have reached is no longer in service. He tried the office line. Dead. He opened his email. Login failed. Account disabled. Then he looked down the block and saw Sierra standing by a loading dock at the side entrance of the building. She was not panicking. She was not looking for him. She was directing movers, checking inventory on a tablet, standing tall with a calm authority that Grant recognized because he had taught it to her. Jessica, he screamed, sprinting toward her. He did not even realize he had used the wrong name. Sierra. She turned. She saw him running, disheveled and desperate. She did not flinch. Grant. Sierra, they locked me out. The marshals are here. We need to activate the backup accounts. She removed his hand from her arm with gentle firmness. There are no backup accounts, Grant. Lydia liquidated the Cayman shell companies an hour ago. She owned them, all of them, but you. We can start over. You and me. I have the IP in my head. We can rebuild. Sierra looked at him with an expression that was almost, but not quite, pity. Grant, I signed a contract with Caldwell Holdings this morning. Ethan hired me as his new VP of Operations. My first assignment is overseeing the acquisition of Mercer Tech assets. Grant staggered backward. You went to Ethan? After everything I did for you? You traitor. What did you do for me? Sierra's voice dropped to a hiss. You took credit for my marketing strategies. You made me lie to investors about revenue projections. You told me to create a fake media campaign to destroy your pregnant wife's reputation. And when the ship started sinking, you did not try to save a single person on board. You ran to the gala to save yourself. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. This was left for you at the front desk. She pushed it into his chest. Goodbye, Grant. Try not to make a scene. It is bad for the brand. She turned and walked into the building that used to be his. Grant tore open the envelope with shaking hands. It was a letter from his bank. Notice of insufficient funds. He checked his banking app. The screen was simple and devastating. Checking account, negative $4,200. Overdraft, savings account, $0. Investment portfolio, frozen by court order. At 6 that evening, FBI agents arrived at Sierra Walsh's apartment in Tribeca. They found encrypted hard drives containing the complete Mercer Technologies AI algorithm, along with wire transfer records showing payments from Caldwell Holdings totaling $1.4 million. Sierra was arrested on charges of corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and wire fraud. She called Grant from the federal holding facility. He did not answer. She called Ethan Caldwell. He sent her to voicemail. By 10 that night, Grant Mercer was standing in the rain outside the Alpine mansion with his belongings and garbage bags on the lawn. The landlord had changed the locks. Grant climbed over the fence, tearing his suit pants, and sat in the mud next to the black plastic bags that contained the wreckage of his life. He had one option left, one desperate, final hope. He dialed Lydia's number. A man's voice answered, "This is Charles Harrington, Senior Counsel for Ms. Lydia Sinclair." "To whom am I speaking?" "This is her husband," Grant shouted over the rain. "Put her on the phone. I need to talk to my wife. Mr. Mercer." Harrington's voice was dry as old paper. "Mrs. Sinclair is unavailable. She is currently en route to a private medical facility for prenatal monitoring. She gave strict instructions that any communication from you be directed to my office. I do not want a lawyer. I want Lydia. Tell her I am sorry. Tell her I made a mistake. Tell her I love her. I have nothing. I am on the street in the rain. She cannot do this to me. Mr. Mercer." Harrington's tone held no sympathy. Ms. Sinclair anticipated this call. "She asked me to relay a message should you reach out." Grant gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "What? Does she want to meet?" "She asked me to remind you of the conversation you had at La Bernardine on your anniversary. You told her that you needed a partner who understood power. Miss Sinclair hopes you are finally learning what true power feels like. It is not a title, Mr. Mercer. It is not a corner office or a Forbes cover. It is the ability to shape reality. She has shaped hers, and now she has shaped yours." Harrington paused. "The divorce decree will be finalized on Monday. The terms of the prenuptial agreement, the agreement you insisted upon, will be strictly enforced. Full custody has been awarded to Ms. Sinclair based on her financial stability. Your documented media campaign against her during a high-risk pregnancy, and the arrest of your associate, Ms. Walsh. You will receive supervised visitation rights pending a financial stability review. Please," Grant whispered, "do not call this number again. Good night, Mr. Mercer." The line went dead. Grant sat in the mud, surrounded by garbage bags, rain running down his face, staring at a phone screen that flickered once and then went black as the battery died. The massive iron gates of the mansion he could no longer enter towered above him, locking him out of the paradise he thought he deserved. He was finally free, just like he asked, and it cost him everything. Here is something most revenge stories will not tell you. Winning does not always feel like winning. Sometimes justice feels like grief, and that is okay. You do not have to be happy about being strong. You just have to keep being strong until the happiness catches up. Lydia Sinclair learned this the hard way. After the gala, after the legal victories, after the FBI arrested Sierra and the courts awarded full custody of her unborn daughter, after every headline declared her the winner, after the world saw her as the triumphant heiress who had crushed her unfaithful husband. After all of it, Lydia went back to the Hamptons estate and sat alone in the nursery she was building for her baby, and she cried, not tears of triumph, tears of grief. She cried for the marriage she had wanted, for the father her daughter deserved. For the 5 years she had spent pretending to be less than she was, dimming her own light, hiding her own name, hoping that love would be enough to make a real life with a man who was too blinded by his own reflection to see the woman standing right in front of him. Maggie found her on the nursery floor at midnight, surrounded by tiny yellow onesies and unassembled furniture. "You won, Lydia," Maggie said softly, sitting down on the floor beside her. "Then why does it feel like losing? Because you are grieving the life you wanted, not the life you had, the life you imagined, the one where he came home and helped you paint this room and held your hand at the doctor's appointments and cried when he heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time. That life never existed, Lydia, but you loved the idea of it, and losing an idea you loved is still loss." Lydia leaned her head on Maggie's shoulder. "When does it stop hurting? I am an ER nurse, not a fortune teller. But if I had to guess, I would say it stops hurting right around the time you stop hoping he will change. Which, if you are anything like most women I know, will be about 6 months from now, on a random Tuesday, when you are eating cereal and you suddenly realize you have not thought about him all day." Lydia laughed through her tears. A small, broken, beautiful sound. "What if it takes longer than 6 months? Then I will be here on month 7 with more ice cream." 8 weeks later, in the maternity ward of New York Presbyterian Hospital, Lydia Sinclair gave birth to a 7-pound, 4-ounce baby girl, Eleanor Rose Sinclair, named after Lydia's mother, Eleanor, who had died when Lydia was 22. The mother who had taught her that strength was not about being loud. It was about knowing who you were and never apologizing for it. The delivery room was quiet, warm, private. Arthur Sinclair stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, trying very hard to look composed and failing completely. When the nurse placed Eleanor in his arms for the first time, his hands trembled. These were hands that signed deals worth billions. Hands that shook the hands of presidents and prime ministers, and they trembled holding a 7-pound baby. "She looks like your mother," Arthur whispered, his voice cracking. "She looks like herself," Lydia said from the bed, exhausted and radiant. Maggie was in the corner, still wearing her scrubs, because she had run straight from her shift at Mount Sinai. "She looks like she is already planning world domination," Maggie said. "Definitely a Sinclair." The months that followed were not a montage of triumph. They were slow and messy and real. Lydia moved into the Hamptons estate permanently. She hired a nanny, but insisted on doing the night feedings herself. She started running the Sinclair Foundation full-time, focusing on maternal health programs and financial literacy for women leaving abusive relationships. She did not date. She did not go to galas. She wore yoga pants and no makeup, and spent her evenings reading board books to a baby who could not yet understand the words, but seemed to love the sound of her mother's voice. She was healing, slowly, in the way that real healing happens. Not with a dramatic speech or a symbolic gesture, but with the quiet, repetitive act of choosing to get up every morning and build something better. 12 months after the divorce was finalized, Lydia received an invitation that changed everything: the United Nations Global Summit on Sustainable Finance, Geneva, Switzerland. They wanted her to deliver the keynote address. "I cannot bring a baby to the United Nations," Lydia told Maggie on the phone. "Why not?" Maggie said. "She is a Sinclair. She probably already has diplomatic immunity." "That is not how diplomatic immunity works." "Fine. But you are going, and you are bringing Eleanor, and you are going to stand at that podium and show the entire world what you built from the wreckage of that man's ego. And Eleanor is going to see it, even if she will not remember it. She will know someday that her mother stood in front of world leaders with a baby on her hip and told them how the world should work." Lydia was quiet for a long moment. "I love you, Maggie. I know. Now go iron your power suit. And not the black one. Wear the white one. White says, 'I am the future.' Also, it photographs better under stage lighting. Trust me, I saw it on a design show." And so, 12 months after Grant Mercer handed her divorce papers at Le Bernardin with a smirk and a Mont Blanc pin, Lydia Sinclair stood at a podium bearing the crest of the United Nations and addressed the world. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, in a strip mall in Queens wedged between a laundromat and a dollar store, a man in a polyester blue polo sat on a wobbling stool and stared at a small television mounted in the corner of an electronics repair shop. The air conditioner in the back room of Quick Fix Electronics rattled like a dying engine. It dripped condensation onto the cracked linoleum floor in a steady rhythm that had become the metronome of Grant Mercer's new life. He went by Grant Brown now, his mother's maiden name. The name Mercer had become toxic, unsearchable, the kind of name that made recruiters hang up and landlords double-check credit reports. He sat on the wobbly stool, adjusting a magnifying lamp over the workbench, squinting at the cracked motherboard of a third-generation tablet that someone's kid had dropped in a swimming pool. "Come on," he whispered, his hands steady despite everything. "Just bridge the connection." His hands were dry, cracked, and stained with soldering flux. The same hands that used to sign contracts at the Ritz-Carlton, the same hands that used to hold a Mont Blanc pen across a white tablecloth and tell his pregnant wife she was not enough. He was not wearing Tom Ford anymore. He was wearing a polyester polo shirt, a size too large, with a name tag pinned crookedly to the chest. Grant. Service Tech. The bell above the door chimed. A young man walked in, mid-20s, fitted navy suit, shiny watch. He carried his laptop like it was garbage he wanted to be rid of. "I need this screen replaced," the young man snapped, tossing the laptop on the glass counter. "And do not give me the 3 to 5 business days speech. I have a pitch meeting with investors in 2 hours. I need it done now." Grant looked at the kid. He saw the set of the jaw, the impatience, the way he looked past Grant as if the person behind the counter was not a person at all, but a piece of furniture, an obstacle, a thing to be used and forgotten. It was like looking into a time mirror. This was Grant 5 years ago. The same arrogance, the same certainty that the universe owed him something. "I can do an expedited repair," Grant said quietly, "but there is a $50 rush fee." $50? The kid scoffed. "Do you know who I am? I am the founder of Streamline. We are disrupting the logistics sector. I should not be paying rush fees to a strip mall repair shop. Grant felt a flicker of the old anger, the old ego trying to ignite like a pilot light. He wanted to tell this kid that he had lost more money in a single afternoon than Streamline would ever make. He wanted to scream that he used to own buildings, like the one this kid probably rented a desk in. But he did not. He could not afford to get fired. His rent was due on Friday. The basement studio apartment in Queens that smelled like mildew and other people's cooking. It is store policy, sir. $50. The kid rolled his eyes, slapped a credit card on the counter, and turned away to scream at someone on his phone about server costs. Grant took the laptop to the back. As he worked, replacing the cracked screen with the mechanical precision of someone who had been doing this for months, his eyes drifted to the small, dusty television mounted in the corner. The shop owner usually had it tuned to sports, but today it was on the Global News Network. The breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen in urgent red letters. Live from Geneva, UN Global Summit on Sustainable Finance. The anchor's voice cut through the workshop static. We now go live to the keynote address from one of the most influential figures in global finance. She has single-handedly reshaped the banking industry's approach to sustainable development, launched the largest maternal health initiative in history, and was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Please welcome the CEO of the Sinclair Group, Ms. Lydia Sinclair. Grant froze. The screwdriver slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the workbench. He walked toward the TV like a man in a trance. He could not look away. He could not move. He could not breathe. There she was, Lydia. She stood at a podium emblazoned with the United Nations crest bathed in soft white light. She wore a white power suit that radiated authority. Her hair was styled in elegant waves. Her eyes were clear and focused and alive in a way Grant had never seen during their marriage. But it was more than the clothes or the stage or the title. It was her presence. She stood at that podium like she had been born to stand there. Like every moment of her life, every secret she had kept, every tear she had shed, every night she had spent alone in a cold mansion waiting for a husband who was never coming home, had been leading to this exact moment. We cannot build a future on debt and ego, Lydia said into the microphone. Her voice was steady and warm and carried the weight of someone who was not performing, but speaking from the deepest part of herself. True value comes from stability, from patience, from nurturing what is real rather than chasing what is shiny. I know this because I spent 5 years learning what happens when you pour everything you have into someone who can only see their own reflection. The camera panned across the audience. World leaders, tech billionaires, Nobel laureates. Royalty from 4 different continents. They were all leaning forward, all listening, all captivated by the woman Grant Mercer had told was not CEO material. The camera shifted to show a man sitting in the front row. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a kind, intelligent face. He was not wearing a flashy suit. He looked like a college professor who had accidentally wandered into the United Nations and decided to stay. His name was Dr. James Thorne, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, author of 4 books on quantum mechanics and 2 on poetry, a man who had won the highest honors the scientific world could offer and who still rode a bicycle to work every morning. He was watching Lydia with an expression that Grant recognized instantly because it was the one thing he had never been able to fake. It was love, real love, the kind that did not need to announce itself or prove itself or perform for an audience. It just existed, quiet and steady and unshakable. Grant's boss, an older man named Sal who chewed on toothpicks and read the newspaper during slow hours, wandered up behind him. "She is something, isn't she?" Sal said, nodding at the TV. They say she is going to be the first trillionaire who gives it all away. Building hospitals, schools, clean water systems. And see that guy sitting next to her, the tall one? Grant could not speak. His throat had closed. That is Dr. James Thorne. They just got engaged. I read about it in the paper last week. He looks at her like she hung the moon, does he not? On the screen, Lydia finished her speech. The audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. Dr. Thorne stood and reached out his hand. Lydia took it. Not a showy, possessive grip. Just a gentle, steady clasp. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Lydia threw her head back and laughed. It was genuine, joyous, free, the kind of laugh that comes from deep inside a person who has found their way home after a long time of being lost. Grant stood in the back room of a strip mall repair shop and watched the woman he had thrown away laugh with another man, and he realized, with a clarity that felt like swallowing broken glass, that he had never made her laugh like that. Not once in 5 years. He had bought her diamonds and designer dresses. He had taken her to 5-star restaurants and flown her on private jets. But he had never once made her throw her head back and laugh with pure, uncomplicated joy. Because he had never tried. Because he had never really seen her. "Hey, tech guy, is my laptop done?" The shout from the front counter broke the spell. Grant looked at the TV one last time. Lydia was waving to the crowd. The camera caught a brief glimpse of a baby stroller at the edge of the stage. Eleanor, his daughter, a daughter he had supervised visitation rights for once a month in a sterile family court center with a social worker watching from across the room. He had seen Eleanor 3 times. She had his mother's eyes and Lydia's smile, and she cried every time he held her because she did not know who he was. "Yeah," Grant said, his voice hoarse. "It is done." He walked to the front and slid the repaired laptop across the counter. The young entrepreneur grabbed it, checked the screen, and grunted. "Took you long enough." He pulled 2 crumpled dollar bills from his pocket and tossed them on the counter. "Here, for your trouble. Buy yourself a clue." The kid turned and walked out, the bell chiming cheerfully behind him, already back on his phone, already forgetting that the man behind the counter had ever existed. Grant stood alone in the silence of the empty shop. He looked down at the $2, not even enough for a subway fare. He looked at his reflection in the glass countertop. The lines around his eyes were deeper than they used to be. His hair was thinner. His shoulders were lower. He looked tired in a way that sleep could not fix. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who had held the world in his hands and dropped it because he wanted to see if it would bounce. It did not bounce. It shattered. He put the $2 in the tip jar by the register. Then he picked up his rag and started wiping down the counter, scrubbing away fingerprints that no one would ever notice, cleaning a surface that would be dirty again by tomorrow. On the television in the corner, the applause for Lydia Sinclair was still rolling. It sounded like waves breaking on a distant shore, like the ocean behind the Hamptons estate, where his daughter was learning to crawl on warm sand, while a man who actually deserved them made her mother laugh. "Happy anniversary, Lydia," Grant whispered to the empty room. He turned off the TV. He finished wiping the counter. He closed the shop at 9 o'clock. He walked to the subway station and waited on the platform with all the other invisible people, the ones whose names nobody knew, whose stories nobody told, whose faces blurred together in the rush hour crowd. The train came. He got on. He sat in a plastic seat next to a woman reading a romance novel and a teenager watching videos on his phone. Nobody looked at him. Nobody recognized him. He was just a man in a blue polo with flux stains on his fingers, going home to a basement apartment. He had wanted to be extraordinary. He had wanted to be remembered. He had wanted to walk into rooms and have people whisper his name with respect and envy. And now the only room that knew his name was a repair shop in a strip mall in Queens. And even there, his name tag said Grant, Service Tech. No last name, no title, no empire. He rode the train into the dark tunnel and disappeared. 3,000 miles away, in a warm kitchen in the Hamptons estate that smelled like chamomile tea and baby powder, Lydia Sinclair sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor on her hip and Maggie across from her arguing about whether an 8-month-old baby could eat a donut. She absolutely cannot eat a donut, Maggie. She has 4 teeth. She has 4 teeth and ambition. Look at the way she is staring at that donut. That is a Sinclair stare. That donut does not stand a chance. Lydia laughed. The same laugh from the UN stage. The same laugh that Grant had never heard. James Thorne walked into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of chamomile tea. He set one in front of Lydia, kissed the top of Eleanor's head, and sat down with a book about string theory that had a coffee stain on the cover. "How was your day?" he asked, as if she had not just addressed the United Nations. "It was good," Lydia said. "It was really good." And it was. Not because she was rich, not because she had won, not because Grant Mercer was fixing tablets in a strip mall while she reshaped the global economy. None of that was why it was good. It was good because she was sitting in a warm kitchen with people who loved her. With a man who looked at her the way James looked at her. With a friend who would drive 90 miles in the middle of the night to sit on a hospital floor and hold her hand. With a baby girl who had her grandmother's name and her mother's eyes and a future that stretched out like a sunlit ocean with no horizon. If there is one thing worth remembering from all of this, it is something Lydia's mother told her before she died. Something that Lydia had forgotten during those 5 years in Grant's cold glass house, but remembered the night she walked out of Le Bernardin and into the rest of her life. Never dim your light to make someone else comfortable. And if someone cannot see your worth when you are standing right in front of them, that is not your failure. That is their loss. And sometimes, just sometimes, it is their lesson. The grass is not greener on the other side. It is greener where you water it. Grant let his garden die. Lydia planted a whole new world. So what do you think? Was Lydia too harsh, or did Grant get exactly what he deserved? Drop your opinion in the comments below. I read the first 500, and trust me, this story always starts a debate. If this hit you in the chest, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell, because next week I have got a story about a cheating husband, a pregnancy secret, and a winning lottery ticket that will make your jaw hit the floor. You do not want to miss it. See you then. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character, every scene, and every twist was crafted with intention to entertain, to inspire, and to remind you of what truly matters. Thank you for being part of this community.